In order to be able to work more effectively with your computer and think a little bit more like a machine and learn how to speak to the computer in the language it understands, which is very precise, which is different coding languages, we need to get used to working in what we call the command line. And it's a way that we get behind this abstraction, which is your desktop environment, and get in to speak more directly to the computer's operating system. So I'm just going to move some things in a little bit here so that you can see them on the video. But this is my desktop environment, the graphic user interface of my Macintosh desktop environment. Your results might vary depending on what kind of computer you're using. So in order to get in behind this environment, we need to be working in on the Mac what's called the terminal application, and on your PC what's called the command prompt. So you can find your terminal application if you open up your Finder window and look in your applications folder. And it needs to be the applications folder for your computer, not the applications folder in your little home directory. So look in the applications folder for your computer. Go all the way down, probably where you'll find it is in the utilities folder. And you're looking for this. It's a little program called Terminal. The first thing I want you to do is drag that into your dock. If you're on a PC, you basically click Start and then type in CMD command, and it'll find the MS-DOS command prompt for you. We're going to be using Terminal on the Mac. So drag that into your dock, and then I want you to open it. And your terminal probably won't look exactly the same as mine. It'll probably just be a white screen with gray text. You can modify that under Preferences. We're not really going to go through that. I'd like you to just work on that on your own. But what we are going to do is we're going to look around a little bit in the terminal, and you'll get a bit of an understanding of how it's simply a quicker, more effective way to talk to your computer, but it means that you need to get a little bit behind this abstraction that is this sort of picture of a desktop that you're used to working in. There's no graphical user interface. When you're working in the terminal, you're communicating with your computer using text commands only. So some of the commands that we use when we're in the command prompt that are the most useful, the first one I'm going to teach you is ls. And what that basically does is it lists what is in the directory that you are in. So what I've done here is I'm listing what is in this directory. That little tilde means that I'm in my home or my root directory. So these are all of the folders that are available for me, and here's my username here. McGlade Pro is the name of this my user profile on this computer. So if I want to see what's inside these directories, I would need to go into them and then do ls. So let's actually have a look at desktop, because we usually know what's in our desktop, and we would expect to see these things in that directory because there they are, they're on my desktop. So in order to look into desktop, we need to change directory. The way you do that in the command prompt or in the command line is CD for change directory, space, and now we have to type the name of the directory that we want to go into. Now I can see immediately that something has changed. Now instead of the little tilde, I see desktop. So this is now, the command line is telling me now I'm in the desktop directory. If I wasn't really sure, because sometimes it happens so quickly, you may not realize that something has changed, I can tell it print working directory, PWD, just to verify where I am. And in fact, it shows me the full path to the directory that I'm now in. I'm in Users, in McGlade Pro, which is my home or root directory, which is how that tilde is represented, and then I'm in Desktop. So that's great. So let's see what's in my desktop. And it's showing me some files that are actually off screen. Here, I'll just move them onto the screen so you can feel good that we're seeing really what's there. So here we see this finances file. There it is over there. There it is over there. There's this index, other odd file that I have there. There's this DMG file. So that's all great. So that seems to be an accurate reflection of what's on my desktop. However, there are things on your desktop that you can't see in the graphic user interface. And the way you see what's really on your desktop, so in other words, now you're really looking behind the veil, is you do ls -a. Well, this is interesting. So there's a lot of other files here, and they're files that I can't see in my graphic user interface. One is this file here. It's called dsstore. Now this is a file that the Macintosh operating system injects into a lot of your files and folders, and you can't see it because it's really just a settings file. However, it's not the kind of file that you would want to share. So that's going to be important later that you understand what that is. It's a system file that holds some of the settings. So it holds the graphic user interface settings that I might have set up around how I want to see my files and folders, if I want the icon to be big or small, if I want to see the file extension or not. So it hangs on to a lot of those kinds of settings. So you might find that it injects itself into some of your files and folders later, and we'll learn in a later lesson how to get rid of it, or at least not allow it to inject itself into our files and folders. So that's sort of interesting. There's other files, there's other things happening on the desktop, on the computer, that I can't see in the graphic user interface. So right away, by using command line tools, you can get a lot more information and much more of a direct access to your computer's operating system than you can when you're using the graphic user interface. So we're just going to go through a few other commands that you can use, and it's very important to practice using these commands on your own. So I'm in Desktop. Say I wanted to go back up to my home directory. There's a few different ways I could do it. One is I could simply do change directory and actually put in the little tilde. And no matter where I am, that's going to bring me back to my home directory. So let's just make sure by print working directory, and yes, I'm back in my home directory. Now let's go into something a little bit more interesting so that we can start to go a little bit deeper. So I'm going to change directory into pictures. And now I'm going to see what's in pictures. I'm going to change directory into photo booth library. Now before I hit return, I'm going to tell you that this is not going to work. And the reason this is not going to work is because there are spaces in this folder name. And the command line is going to think that these spaces indicate that these are different words that are part of the code, that are part of the command. So if I want to go to a directory that has spaces in the name, I actually need to enclose it in quotes. So after you do this a few times, you will realize why it's simply not a good idea. Even though it's a lot more easy to read for you when you're using the graphic user interface, it's really annoying to always have to put quote signs around folder names because there's spaces in them. So the teachable moment there, the lesson to be learned is don't use spaces in your file or folder names. Always put an underscore. So now I've gone into Photo Booth Library. Let's see what's in there. So there's all sorts of other folders. So let's change directory and we're going to go into Contents. Let's print working directory, and yes, now here's the full path to where we are. Now if I want to go to a different directory now, there's a whole bunch of different ways I can do it. I can change directory, we've seen that, CD. If I want to go back up a level, so I want to go back, kind of hit the back button and go into Photo Booth Library, I can do that by typing CD ... And sure enough, I'm back in Photo Booth Library. If I want to go, for example, into one of the other folders at the same level as Contents, I can list the directory, I can go back into Contents, I can go back into Photo Booth Library, or I can type the full path. So I can say CD users McGlade Pro pictures Photo Booth Library. And let's go into backdrops. Oh, now this is a great example of where the space issue is a problem. Because there's a space, it just cut off my command after photo, and it's saying there's no such file as directory. So let's try doing that in a different way. Let's type the full path. Whoops. So now let's see where we are. And sure enough, we have gone into where we want it to do. But again, a really great reason why you should never put spaces in your folder names. It's just super annoying, and you will forget to put the quotes, and you will get these sort of errors. So it's best just not to put those spaces. So we've seen two different ways that we can change directories. We can hit the back button by doing CD ... Actually, three different ways. We can go straight back to our home by hitting the CD tilde. We can put the direct path as well. So if you know the path to a directory, you can go right there. Otherwise, what you probably end up doing is sort of navigating around by going back and going up and down and using print working directory to see where you are. Now I'm going to go back to my home directory, and we're going to learn one more command which is quite useful in the command line, and that is the man command. So man stands for manual. So if you're ever curious about what a command can do, you can do man and then the command. And that will show you everything having to do with with that command and all of the different things that you can do with it. So man is very, very useful. In order to get out of the manual, you just hit the letter Q, and that will get you out. So the only other command that we're going to have a look at now, because it's quite useful, is if you need to make a new folder. So I'm now in my home directory. I'm just going to go into the desktop just so you can see what happens very clearly. And I'm going to make a new folder. The way you do that is mkdir, make directory. I'm not going to put any spaces in this folder name. I'm going to call it test folder. Now it ended up popping up just outside the screen, but there it is. I've made that test folder. Now let's go into that test folder. and I'm going to make a file. And the quickest and easiest way to make a file is using the touch command. Now let's just list and see if it's there, and it's telling me it's there, but just to make sure, I'm actually going to open it up, and there it is. So there's a lot that you can do from the command line. It's a lot quicker than using the graphic user interface, and it's a way to really be working with your computer without all of the abstraction layer of the graphic user interface. So the one other command that's going to be useful for you to know is command. So the command key on your computer, Command K. When you're in the terminal, will clear the screen, and you're starting with a fresh screen. Now all it's doing is just starting you with a fresh screen. I'm still inside my test folder, and there is my text file. So the best thing that you can do is go online and search for some of the basic commands and practice, practice, practice. Get in here and move around and make files and make folders and get used to working with your computer using text and simple text commands rather than the drag and drop of the graphic user interface.